So yes, I have a background in anthropology and linguistics. So obviously you're thinking, next logical step, start a web design company. And 13 years ago, I did just that. And today we work with phenomenal brands like 4 Barrel Coffee Roasters, Salt and Straw Ice Cream that Brett talked about yesterday, and even Travel Blog Success, who's here today at the conference. Now, we also put on a podcast that's all about coffee branding. And through this vantage point, through the design studio, through the podcast, I'm able to see how brands successfully articulate their brand story and voice on their websites. And so I'd like to share a few of those tips with you today. When we first moved into our new studio 2 years ago, we got this GS3 espresso machine. It's a phenomenal machine. I was so excited about it. It's by La Marzocco, one of our clients. I was really proud to be representing them. And clients would come, and I would tell them, don't bring coffee. We've got your coffee covered. I mean, that's a beautiful coffee shop. We could make this in our studio. But inevitably, people would walk in, and they'd be holding a to-go mug. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, why are you paying for coffee when I just let you know that I could give you this free coffee and it's amazing? And so finally I asked somebody, why'd you bring a to-go mug? And they said, the coffee shop next door serves Stumptown coffee roasters, and I love Stumptown. But you know, I was serving Stumptown too, I just didn't tell them. If people don't know about your brand, if you're a commodity, if you're coffee, if you're ice cream, if you're bread, there's nothing to differentiate you from the other coffee or ice cream or bread out there. And so they're going to look for the lowest price, because it's all basically the same. But if you can get them to love your brand, instead of being this product without meaning is a commodity, if you can get them to love your brand, then that means something. They're going to come back again and again, purchase from you. So why talk about coffee? Well, there are over 2 billion cups of coffee consumed in the world every day. That's a lot of money being made. In fact, coffee is, after crude oil, the most sought-after commodity in the world. So we're trying to help our clients just get a little bit more of that piece of the pie. Now, commodity becomes a brand when it establishes an emotional connection, like Stumptown had with our customers that were coming in. And when I talk about brand, I'm not talking about your logo. I'm talking about everything someone sees, everything they think when they look at your brand offering. Everything that creates meaning. Now, a lot of businesses are phenomenal about getting their brand voice and message into their stores, into their products, even some of the materials that are going out. But then I see them setting up a Shopify site, slapping a logo on it, putting some images up, and calling it good. And I'm going to talk about 4 tips for getting your authentic brand voice on your website using WooCommerce, using 4 projects that we've worked on in the last year. And the first is 4 Barrel Coffee Roasters. Now, 4 Barrel is a fiercely independent coffee roaster. They have a really strong brand voice, but their website was that exact site I just described to you. There was a logo. They have like 4 logos, so it was just one of their many logos and a couple photos. But you walk into their space and there are posters up, and there's content everywhere. Their Instagram feed is phenomenal. And so we started asking, like, who's making all of this? Turns out they have an illustrator on staff, they have a copywriter on staff, and one of their owners is so obsessed with black and white photography that he was taking photos everywhere and just putting it on Instagram. Now, I just realized that I had their fuck it mug in one of the photos, but I think after Pep's talk yesterday, we're fine, right? Anyway, so we created a site for 4 Barrel where we took all of their brand assets and we put it on the site. People were pretty excited. We even added a subscription program so that fans from all over could start subscribing. It's been really successful. Now, another thing about 4Barrel is that you can walk in and you can get your coffee really quick, but you can also go to their slow bar and chat about the coffee. And so when we put their site online, instead of categorizing by region, which is something that almost all coffee roasters will do, we categorized by flavor. And this is completely different than what's happening out there. If we would have just copied other coffee roasters, this wouldn't be there. And people are starting to talk about it. When 4Barrel was listed as one of the 21 best coffee roasters in the country, they were the only roaster whose website was mentioned. So first, authentic voices. Look at what brand assets you're already creating and make sure those make it to your website as well. Now, next is Darleen from Supercrown. Now, Darleen founded Gorilla Coffee Roasters, sold it, and this is her next business. It's a subscription. You have two choices. How many bags do you want? How often do you want them? And when Darleen curates this subscription and sends you coffees, she's also sending these really interesting coffee cards, bright, colorful. On the back, there's a description of the coffee that you're getting. But the description is pretty short. But Darleen's website is on WordPress, and so we created a journal where she could post her roast reports and talk about those coffees in detail. And then we made this fun little sorter and clicker, but the really big part of this is that journal and her ability to go deeper into the story. And this is something that's really unique about WooCommerce. WooCommerce is integrated with WordPress, one of the most amazing CMSs in the world. And so when you have a WooCommerce site, really think about how can you harness the power of WordPress to tell your story. Now next, there's Aleco from Red Fox Coffee Merchants. And coffee merchants, they go out, they find coffee, and then they sell to people like Darleen, people like 4Barrel. And Aleco is unique in that he's finding these really hard to find coffees, sometimes hiking for a week to find these coffees. And so his coffees are a bit more expensive than what you would find on the commodities market. And these coffee merchants are just starting to go online. So in the last year, a few of them have started to sell their coffees online, but it's kind of new. And one thing that's really important to Aleco is, as his business goes online, it still feels like you called him. It still feels like you had a conversation with him. And Aleco doesn't sell coffee. People book coffee lots. And this is a really important distinction to him. He would not put a site online unless we could book coffee, not buy now. But there are great plugins for WooCommerce, and we were able to change the names of different processes to booked for this one, for Aleco. And once you change that, it starts to show up in your transactional emails, it starts to show up in your recent orders. The language has changed throughout the site, and it starts to feel like this was a custom-built site for Aleco. There are even places in the default admin area of WooCommerce where you can change language. And I would encourage you to go and look through all of those and start thinking, how does my brand talk about this part of the process? Because when you change this language, it changes in a lot of different places on the site. And you can start to use your authentic brand voice instead of the default. And that's something super unique about WooCommerce. If you're using a Shopify website, websites from other systems, you can't often do that. So the power of language. Now finally, we work with a fellow named Andrew Barnett. And Andrew is a master coffee roaster. He's been in the business for years. This is his third coffee company. Andrew has the reputation of being the nicest guy in coffee. Many people will say that. And he's also a really humble person. So when I had my first meeting with Andrew, he's in San Francisco, he's in the Mission District, and he texted me, I'm going to be at morning coffee at 9, or morning laundry at 9, find me. So I walked up and down the street looking for, I don't know what I could assumed was like a really fancy breakfast spot that he had found. And I kept walking back and forth in front of a laundromat where there was a man folding the laundry. And of course, that was Andrew. He was folding the laundry for his coffee shop. And I tell you this because when we first started working with Andrew, we wanted to make him something that he would be really excited about because we were so excited to be working with him. And we thought we showed him the best of what the web was capable of. And when Andrew saw our initial designs, he said, "That's not me. I'm really straightforward. That's why people follow me. That's why people want to get a subscription from me. I don't want things to move. I don't want things to be difficult to find. I want it to be clean and clear and simple." And that's what we ended up creating for Andrew, is the website that was the perfect articulation of his brand, not the fancy site that we wanted to make as designers. And so I would say this: when you're working on your website, you'll see other people, maybe your competitors, doing things that seem exciting and interesting, but you'll know if they aren't reasonable for your brand. You'll know if they're not a good representation of your brand. And if a designer shows you something and it doesn't feel right, or you see something and it doesn't feel right, trust your gut, because you know your brand better than anyone else. And finally, I'll just leave you with the idea that people don't have relationships with products, they're loyal to brands. And so it's important that your website is an articulation of that brand. Thank you. Any of the plugins that I talked about, I will link to by the weekend at that URL. Thanks so much, and good luck.